webinaire va bientôt commencer. Veuillez rester en ligne. Le webinaire va bientôt commencer. Veuillez rester en ligne. La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seule.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this briefing by the co-chairs and the secretariat on the first draft. We have held two briefing sessions today. One is this one and one earlier today at 8 a.m. Montreal time. Before we start, I just wanted to share a few points on logistics. Following the co-chair's presentation, we will have an hour or so to take your questions for clarification and understanding on the framework. To ask a question, please type it in the question box. For participants dialing in by phone, we will give you a chance to ask your questions of clarification and understanding orally before we turn to answering written questions from other participants. For anyone joining us through Facebook or YouTube, you can send us your questions by email to live@cbd.int. That is live@cbd.int. I will moderate your questions and address them to the co-chairs. Kindly be reminded this is not a negotiation session, but an opportunity for you to seek further clarification and understanding on different aspects of the first draft. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the CBD website. Thank you, and now over to the co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. I hope you can hear me well, and please signal if you can. We will present the draft, and welcome to all of you to the briefing. And we will present the draft that has been released on the 12th of July in 6 UN language. The aim of the presentation today is to familiarize you with the structure and content of the draft. And we also talk briefly about digital sequencing information and the document released on the same day. This briefing will give us a chance to answer your question. We've also scheduled some time to explain how we will work and talk about the process after that. So please keep in mind, the aim today is to explain and ensure you have a good understanding of the draft, and the time for the discussion and negotiation will come later. So let me pass on the floor to Francis. I will say before starting that this morning I was experiencing some network delay. Hopefully that's not going to happen tonight, but I'll be happy to play the slide for Francis. So Francis, over to you. I'll be sharing my screen now.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. We, as Co-Chair said, we are going to share this presentation. I'll take on some slides, and then he will be completing the other slides where I stop. So this is the second briefing, as you've heard. In my case, actually, it is already another day, but in Canada, it is still within the same day. It is 3 a.m. here in Uganda. That is how time difference makes things look so different in different parts of the world. So if you could go to the second slide, Coach. So in terms of presentation, how are we going to proceed? One, we shall try to give you the context, that is to tell you what informed the development of draft one. And then we shall delve into the presentation of draft one itself, but also give you an update on digital sequence information about the process so far. And we close the presentation with an overview of the post-2020 process. Where are we? What are we having yet ahead coming? And so that is the outline of the presentation. Coach, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so in terms of context, really, what informed the development of the draft one? First, I have to tell you that even if we have had a lockdown immediately after actually the meeting of the second meeting of the working group in Rome in 2020, the co-chairs and the team from the Secretariat have worked so hard from that time to date. And so we'd like to thank the team from the Secretariat. We'd like to thank all those stakeholders that have made it possible for us to come up with this draft. We have continued to work despite the challenges which are there. I'm therefore to tell you that because of that, we are able to present today draft one. So in January 2020, after the first meeting we had of the working group in August in 2019, I hope, in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, we then were told to actually develop a draft zero, which draft zero was ready in January, and then that was presented to stakeholders. Following that, we then had the second meeting of the working group where the draft zero was presented. And in that meeting, we were given a mandate to actually develop or update the draft zero into an updated draft. So then we had the updated zero draft, and that was based on the outcome of the meeting which took place in Rome, and that was published in July 2020. Of course, we presented again to stakeholders, to parties, and then after that, we now prepared draft one. But what was that based on? It was based on the outcome of the remaining thematic consultation that took place after Rome, but also on the outcomes of SAPSTA 24th and SBI 3 virtual meeting, which ended sometime in June. And of course, from that, we really had a lot to look at. 2,000 comments, 700 pages. That was a lot. So the team from the Secretariat, the co-chairs had to do a lot of thinking through. The Secretariat team was there to help us really, with this work. Otherwise, it is not something you take it for granted that you can ably handle 700 pages alone or as co-chairs alone. So the team from the Secretariat have played a very big role in this. Could we go to the next slide? Technology, I'm sure it could already be, yes. Now, some major points here, maybe before we go further, let's try to bring you some linkages between the goals, between the milestones, between the action targets. So we have got the 2050 vision. Now, what we've done with the goals is that we've had to develop or craft measurable or status kind of goals so that we are able to measure, the 2050 vision. So in that case, when we present the goals, you'll see that the goals are actually measurable. And then the milestones themselves will help us to see whether we are making progress towards the 2030 targets. So we have set ourselves to move towards 2030 with some targets, as we're going to see. But the milestone will tell us, are we getting there? And therefore, are we getting close or making progress towards the 2050 vision? And then you will see that we have got, under each goal, we have got the milestones. But above all, for the milestones and the goals, they are stated, but you need to do something. You need to take action for you to actually get there. So then we have got the action targets, which actually define for us how we are going to reach those milestones. And eventually, when you have, of course, achieved the milestone, then you can get to the mission, you can get to the vision, you can get to your goals. So that is how this whole thing is, connected. You will see in the presentation of draft 1, which you have, that actually we don't have any square brackets. That tells you clearly that as co-chairs with a team from the Secretariat, we want to see progress. Other than coming back to you with square brackets, we have, after hearing from the outcome from Substar and SBI3, and based on the information that we have got, you will see that we have got some of those targets with numerical targets in there. But for those that did not have evidence, you will find that we have not put numerical targets on them. But that does not make those targets less smart. They are still smart in our own way of crafting it. They are still smart, they're still measurable, and we think we can move forward in that direction. So we came to realize as a team working on this that even where you don't have numerical targets, you can still have those smart targets. So let's go to the next slide, Co-Chair. Yes, this is basically to give you a summary of what this, before we go into the presentation of the draft 1 itself. One thing we have to keep in mind is that this is a framework that is going to address a number of issues that touches on biodiversity. And we've said that biodiversity, of course, touches across so many sectors, so many conventions, to the point that you can't develop only targets that will be purely on biodiversity, because biodiversity has got so many elements around it. And therefore, we are saying here that the framework is a framework for all. If you're going to develop a framework for all, which takes into account all the other MEAs, conventions, subnational government consideration, and others, that means even the private sector, all stakeholders that basically will play a role in implementing this framework. It means that we have to come up with a text that is easy for all these stakeholders to understand, because we are not only dealing with people in the CBD arena, but a wide group of stakeholders. So making this framework simple, but without making it lose context or content, is what we have been trying to really achieve. And therefore, while we were crafting this, we took into account the comments we received that the updated zero draft seemed to have had some of those action targets, that there was duplication, some looked very similar. And so we've tried our best to really look at that. And for sure, we did find that the issue was, as stated, there were some areas that were looking very close. And so we've tried ourselves to really make sure that this version that is before you, draft 1, minimizes duplication. And I hope as you read them through, you will see that we have addressed that. In case you still see that this is draft 1, we are ready, and we can always still work along and see how we improve on it further. Let's go to the next slide, Co-Chair. Yeah, so this is the theory of change of the framework. Before I get there, of course, you will see that we have got other sections before this section D, the theory of change. You've got a section that gives you, section A is on the background, which basically gives you some information about the importance of biodiversity to human well-being. All along, we've been saying this, that this framework which we are developing is because biodiversity is so important for human beings. If it weren't, I think we would not be taking all this effort, but it's because of that very important role, very important contribution that biodiversity actually makes for human well-being. And even a healthy planet itself depends on biodiversity. So that section or part A gives you background to the framework. Then B actually is on the purpose of the framework itself. So the framework should give us that opportunity to galvanize urgent action, which is transformative across all governments, across all society. That is what that part B on purpose aims to state. And so it will give you that we need to achieve what we have set ourselves to achieve. We are talking about the vision, we are talking about the mission, we are talking about the goals, we are talking about the targets. So that is the purpose of that section. Then you come to section C, which gives you the relationship between the framework and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Remember, we have had quite a lot during the consultations that biodiversity has got a very big role it plays in ensuring that actually the agenda which we have set ourselves for in the world, especially the SDGs, are achieved. And therefore, that brings me straight to the theory of change, which is section D of the framework. The theory of change, like I was saying, starts with the part you see in black. And basically, that is the part which is telling us that things are not good, but we want to move away from there. We want that transformative change to get to the better state, the desired state by 2050. That is living in harmony with nature. And how are you going to live in harmony with nature? Which we are saying you don't have to wait for some period closer to 2050. Rather, you need to start off even today if you can. Please, we would pray that you do that. And I know there is a number of already parts of the world that actually already are living in harmony with nature. We've heard how the IPLCs, wherever they are, where they are, those areas seems to be better well managed in terms of biodiversity conservation. So you would say, although we are talking about this, still there are some places where we can learn lessons from. So that by that time, what do we need to do to get to Vision 2050? One, we need to be wisely using biodiversity. Two, we have to restore biodiversity. We have to conserve biodiversity, and we have to value it. So those are the critical elements of living in harmony with nature. If we can go ahead to implement those three or realized outcomes in those 4 areas that are listed as part of the elements of the Vision 2050, then we shall really surely get to that place we need. But that place, living in harmony with nature, you would say maybe is that state of the Adam and Eve, kind of the beginning part of creation. And yet, we are saying now we want to get back there. So it means the place was already better, but we made it worse. Our actions is actually making the world become much more difficult for us to realize the benefits it gives us. So it means we want to go back. We want to play back the time, make things better again for ourselves. So we are going to move from this state in black where things are very bad. We've seen now what's happening in the world. Climate change, we heard the science told us a lot about it, but it seems people took it for granted. Now you can see the global kind of panic, which is on how to address climate change. So loss of biodiversity is jeopardizing human well-being and sustainable development. The loss of biodiversity can be in terms of ecosystem, can be in terms of species, genetic diversity. We have heard that we may lose up to 1 million species. People think that is just something, it's just maybe species disappearing, not maybe the human being disappearing, but it has consequences, as we shall explain as we move along. So if we want to move from this bad state, which is in black, and to the desired state, it means we are going to work very hard. And therefore we have got those 3 critical areas where the action areas are. You have the reducing threats, meeting needs of people, and then the tools and solutions to facilitate those actions that we are going to take. But above all, the means of implementation has to be there. People must be more accountable, they must be more responsible, they must be more transparent, and then also the conditions should be the one that is conducive, one that can allow those actions to happen. Next, after that, you see then the milestone and the goals. And you see that there is a kind of, they are together almost, but you see there's a shading and then it fades off to a white surface, a better one. Meaning for each of the milestones we have set ourselves to do, they're the ones that will lead us to the goals. And once you've effectively achieved the goals, the 4 which we have stated, then the dreamland, the desired state is possible. So there are 4 goals. There are goals which we're going to cover on ecosystem, species, and genetic diversity, meeting the needs of human beings, benefit sharing, and then, of course, means of implementation. So that is how, when you look at this framework in terms of theory of change, it gives you already what the framework is. In fact, the framework itself is crafted along this. This gives you a picture of what is coming when you look at it. So it is a very powerful communication tool. We can keep improving if you need us to improve it. But anybody who looks at this should be able to tell what is in the minds of people as they are trying to work on putting nature back on the path that it can give us the services it provides for both the present and the future generation that is there to come. Co-chair, let's go to the next one. Yes, so here, because the letters are very, very small, I'll try to use the text that we have in on the document itself. I may not be using the screen itself so much, but I will be following it as I speak. So we now go to the goals and the milestones. Something I wanted to bring up very up front here is that when you see the updated zero draft and this draft, you will see that previously, that it is in the updated zero draft, that you needed to first read the goals and then move somewhere after the mission, then you see the milestone. But this time we have said we needed to think through this framework, see how we improve on the structure, see how when someone is reading it, it can flow easily, you can easily connect the elements that need to fit into each other immediately. So you'll find that now under each goal, we've got the milestones. So as I said earlier, the milestone will help us to see whether we're making progress towards the goals at all. So each of the milestones has got now, each of the goals has got the milestone immediately below it. Now going to goal A, this is one which has got a lot of text, but it is because of the views we had, the advice we got when we were in Rome, that we needed to merge some targets and come up with one target, a target that combines a number of things other than having them separately. And so here on goal A, which deals with the integrity of all ecosystems, it deals with the connectivity and integrity of natural ecosystems, it deals with the healthy and resilient population of all species, it deals with the genetic diversity of wild and domesticated species. We heard that we are not given as much attention to genetic diversity, but again, we needed to bring all this in this goal. And so you'll see that this goal has so many elements in it, but at the end of it all, you will find that in the milestones and in the action targets, we've tried to bring out all these elements so that most of it, if not all of them, are actually captured. So goal A, if I may read for you, says the integrity of all ecosystems is enhanced with an increase of at least 15% in the area, connectivity, and integrity of natural ecosystem, supporting healthy and resilient population of all species. Now, when we're talking about having a resilient population of all species, it is just not the species themselves existing for their own sake. Even for us, what are we surviving on as humans? For food, for medicine, for all this, it is on species. Ecosystem, you're talking about water, you're talking about, we are going mentioning this, some of those ecosystem services we get, which you're going to see when you unpack, they are all from nature. And then the rate of extinction has been reduced at least tenfold, and the risk of species extinction across all taxonomic and functional groups is halved. People said we are not ambitious with the framework. Remember the first one is saying all ecosystems, all taxonomic group, all species. That tells you we are trying to be as ambitious as possible with this framework. And then the genetic diversity of wild and domesticated species is safeguarded for our own well-being. First of all, much as the species will be there, if they're not there, we are not on this planet. So let's go to the milestones. So milestone A says net gain in area, connectivity, and integrity of natural systems of at least 5%. That is by 2030. Milestone A2, the increase in extinction rate is halted or reversed. In fact, maybe let's aim at reversing, because halting alone, it could mean you halt again, allow it to happen. Let's aim at even reversing it to be more ambitious. And the extinction risk is reduced by at least 10% with a decrease in the proportion of species that are threatened. I told you of what science is telling us on the loss of species, and the abundance and distribution of population of species is enhanced or at least maintained. That is what that milestone is. Then milestone 3 under goal A, this is about genetic diversity. Says genetic diversity of wild and domesticated species is safeguarded. Again, this is for our own good first and foremost, because we depend on this, with an increase in the proportion of species that have at least 90% of their genetic diversity maintained. That is milestone, the third one for goal A. Now for goal B, this is about contribution of nature to our well-being. I've already explained this. We are just here because biodiversity is there. And it doesn't matter who you are in society. It doesn't matter. However much you are powerful or you occupy which position, at the end of the day, you are a beneficiary of biodiversity. If biodiversity is not there, you will not exist. Doesn't matter which position you occupy in society. So goal B says nature's contribution to people are valued, maintained, or enhanced through conservation and sustainable use, supporting the global development agenda for the benefit of all. I've told you, because of loss of biodiversity in the theory of change, we are seeing that even the sustainable development goal is being undermined. Look at those 17 sustainable development goals. Almost maybe 80%, if not all of them, biodiversity is written all over it. If there's loss of biodiversity, the rest of those goals, most of it might just remain a wish, because nature has a very critical role when it comes to realizing those SDGs. Now, what are the milestones under goal B? Milestone 1, nature and its contribution to people are fully accounted and inform all relevant public and private decisions. Nature and its contribution to people are fully accounted for. If we know those, and we have presented it to policymakers, the values, we tell them the values of nature. Why should it not form? Why should it make them make better decisions? Milestone B2 says the long-term sustainability of all categories of nature's contribution to people is ensured, with those currently in decline restored. Remember, now this is one of the elements of the Vision 2050, restored. In the earlier one, we were talking about conservation and sustainable use. Wise use is one of the elements of the Vision 2050. So we have told you that we'll try to unpack all this here, contributing to each of the relevant development goals. Then goal C, this is about access to genetic resources and benefit sharing. What you're going to see in this goal is that we brought in the elements of monetary and non-monetary benefits when it comes to benefit sharing. And so goal C says the benefits from utilization of genetic resources are shared fairly and equitably, with substantial increase in both monetary and non-monetary benefits shared, including for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Again, you'll see that we are still tying ourselves well with the elements of the Vision 2050, but also, before I forget, is that we were told try to balance the 3 objectives of the convention. So this is when you see we have really tried our best. Now, what are the milestones? There are 2 here. Milestone 1, C1 says the share of monetary benefits received by providers, including holders of traditional knowledge, has increased. That is milestone 1 under goal C. And then milestone 2 under goal C says non-monetary benefits, such as the participation of providers, including holders of traditional knowledge, in research and development has also increased. So that is how we have tried to capture both monetary and monetary benefits arising from utilization of genetic resources. Goal D, this is about means of implementation. My co-chair and I, and I'm sure most of you also will support us in this, that if we have a framework which is not resourced, which is not funded, I think we shall have just spent energy, not worthwhile, because then nothing happens. All the goals, the milestones, the mission, they will never be realized. So this goal is on means of implementation. And there is the talk about increasing finances for biodiversity, but also there is a gap. And the co-chair will try to put that in a very good flow diagram, which you are going to see. Now, goal D says the gap between available financial and other means of implementation and those necessary to achieve the Vision 2050 is closed. It is closed. When you reach 2050, really, should we still be talking about this issue of there's a financing gap in biodiversity, given the very important role it plays? And we know that if biodiversity is not on this planet, we are gone. So if we know the importance of biodiversity and we see what it's doing for us, why should funding it remain a challenge? Why should it be that every time there's funding for biodiversity, people are saying they don't understand the values of biodiversity, it is difficult to explain what biodiversity is, but this is what basically sustains us here on this planet. So we should be financing it better in the post-2020. So milestone D1 says adequate financial resources to implement the framework are available and deployed, progressively closing the financing gap up to at least $700 billion per year by 2030. Co-chair will try to unpack that when we get to that slide. Milestone D2, under goal D, adequate other means. You may not only need financial per se all the time to implement, including capacity building and development, technical and scientific cooperation, and technology transfer to implement the framework to 2030 are available and deployed. And something we've seen, those of you who participated in implementation of the current strategic plan for biodiversity, I might use the word current because we haven't yet adopted this framework. That strategic plan had or suffered a lot of challenges on finances, on capacity building. We kept discussing this as the strategic plan was already approved and trying to agree on some of them like 3 years to go or 2 years to go. Honestly, things couldn't wait for us. And let me tell you this, that as we continue to delay funding for biodiversity, really, the loss is not going to wait for us. Biodiversity is one of the global crises that needs to be handled in tandem with others. It is not about saying, let's only tackle one, then we come to biodiversity later. Nothing will be static for us. So in this case, therefore, even capacity building, development and others becomes very critical for implementing the framework. Then milestone D3 says, adequate financial and other resources for the period 2030 to 2040 are planned or committed by 2030. And this is it. There should be continuity. We shouldn't wait 2030 and then we are again saying, what do we need? Where are the resources? This business as usual will make the case for biodiversity become worse over time. And we now see, as I said earlier, how climate change is proving to be a challenge, because I think for most of the time people thought perhaps we need first to wait a little bit, then take action later. In fact, right now, biodiversity, climate change, land use, these are things that should be done in tandem. You can't hold one and say you're going to get to it back later. Things will be very bad. Now let's go to the action targets, co-chair. And the action targets as the screen comes. We have got the Vision 20. We have got the goals. We have got the milestones. Now, if we don't do anything, then those goals, the vision, the mission, the milestones, they cannot be realized. This is where now we shall be counted for. Have we done anything to get to the goals, to get to the mission, and so forth? So the action targets, as we said earlier, they are grouped into those categories. We shall start with the ones that deals with reducing threats. And target 1, this is on land use and sea use areas. we should be under special planning. It says, ensure, and before I get there, this time round, we have not said by 2030, by 2030, by 2030, no, because these goals, all of them are for by 2030. If you, the party, say we've lost some 2 years, it will be by 2032, then that is it, we can modify to 2032, depending, because it is for 10 years. But remember, if we adopt it next year, then it will not be 10 years, it will be 7 or 8. So you will not see mention of 2030 because all that we are talking about is by 2030. That's why the text now no longer starts with by 2030, by 2030. So target 1 says, ensure that all land and sea areas globally are under integrated biodiversity inclusive spatial planning, addressing land use and sea use change, retaining existing intact and wilderness area. Biodiversity inclusive spatial planning, because planning is going to be done. Sometimes even those who do planning may not be people in the biodiversity arena, but we are saying this is a framework for all. So as they're doing the planning, then they should not forget to include the aspect of biodiversity. Biodiversity should be part of that spatial planning. Now, target 2 deals with actual restoration. And you see, we have talked about if we are going to live in harmony with nature by 2050, we should be doing restoration. We shall have restored. And surely we've done enough damage to the ecosystem, to biodiversity, that restoration now becomes one of the action areas. So target 2 says, ensure that at least 20% of degraded freshwater, marine, terrestrial ecosystems are under restoration, ensuring connectivity among them and focusing on priority ecosystems. Those are the priority ecosystems can be determined at the national level. Now, target 3 is about the 30 by 30. And we've heard how really we have seen that perhaps the earlier ambition we had in the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011-2020 didn't go far enough. The 17% terrestrial areas and then the 30%, sorry, the 10% for marine ecosystem. I think we found that those percentages were not ambitious enough. They have not delivered us to where we want to be. So this time round, we are now talking about 30 by 30. Target 3 says, ensure that at least 30% globally of land areas and of sea areas, especially areas of particular importance for biodiversity and its contribution to people, are conserved through effectively and equitably managed, ecologically representative and well-connected system of protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures, and integrated into the wider landscape and seascape. You see, we are saying those areas and its contribution to people. As I said earlier, most of the things we are doing is because if nature exists and is healthy and can do or deliver those services better, we are well off as human beings. Target 4, this is about recovery of species, says ensure effective management action to enable the recovery and conservation of species and the genetic diversity of wild and domesticated species, including through ex situ conservation, and effectively manage human-wildlife interactions. Human-wildlife interaction to avoid or reduce human-wildlife conflict. The population of the world is increasing. So also the human-wildlife population might increase or will increase. That is what we hope it should be. But as the population of a human being increases, means less space for animals might turn out to be the case. So you expect that the interaction between humans and wildlife is going to increase. Therefore, when you're talking about the other 30 by 30 and other effective area-based conservation measures, it is because we need to be balancing this to reduce human-wildlife conflict. Number 5, target 5 is on harvesting, sustainable use. If you're going to do harvesting, if you're going to do trade, which we say we cannot say it shouldn't be there, but to make sure that things are happening in a well-planned manner and that it is not detrimental to biodiversity, above all preventing illegal wildlife trade, we are saying that ensure that the harvesting and trade and use of wildlife species or wild species is sustainable, legal, and safe for human health. Watch here, these dogs of mine have started. I don't know whether I could do fast take on there. I'm sure the noise might be too much.
So Francis, I can take over if that is better. I'm sure those dogs are worrying about you now, hearing your voice. Let's move on to target number 6, which is around the invasive alien species. As wildlife manager, we all know this is a problem that is getting more serious every year. And here we choose to reword a little bit the targets. It is now talking about preventing and reducing the rate of introduction and establishment by at least 50%. And then the second part is around the control and eradication, focusing on priority species and spaces. On 7, this is around the pollution and then bringing down the pollution level to levels that are not harmful to biodiversity and ecosystem function and human health. You see here mention of human health, and one that gives me the opportunity to say that you will see that in a number of places in this framework we talk about health. And that's the way we've been trying to deal with the links to the pandemics and health.
Yeah,
now,
Co-Chair, they have, I think they have kept that. I can continue, then you will come on. Because I think it will be too much for you to present all the other slides. Yeah, so target 8, this is on the contribution of biodiversity to helping us adapt to climate change. You could have heard from the news already what countries are doing right now, the ambitions they're saying about addressing issues on climate change. I had the EU, very interesting to know that actually they're already setting themselves targets by 2035. They say they want to be 55%, you know, they will have addressed their carbon issues by 55%, reduced by 55% by 2035, and by 2050, carbon neutral. China is talking about 2060, carbon neutral. Now, something I'm asking myself, why don't we hear similar statement resonating for biodiversity? And yet ecosystems actually is busy absorbing carbon dioxide. I would say free if we can only enhance it. And you will see the figure we're giving in this target, which translates into so much in economic terms. So if we're making statements, if there's a global commitment on climate change, and we've seen that the linkage between climate change and biodiversity is so clear, let's really pray. Let's see that our politicians, our leaders, begin communicating the same ambition, the same urgency for biodiversity. Because these leaders, when they say something, people really understand them better. People take the message seriously. So target 8 says, minimize the impact of climate change on biodiversity, contribute to mitigation and adaptation through ecosystem-based approaches, contributing to at least 10 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year to global mitigation efforts. See what nature is going to do and ensure that all mitigation and adaptation efforts avoid negative impacts on biodiversity. Because we need biodiversity. We can't say we are tackling climate change and we do it carelessly and biodiversity is all gone. That will mean we have not solved the problem, we have worsened the problem, one or the other. That is what that target is saying. So there's a lot nature can contribute, honestly, to the issues of climate change adaptation. Going to meeting the needs of people, target 9, this is about food nutrition, is about medicine, is about livelihoods. If I'll give you an example in my country, every time I'm moving up country and I'm driving along the roads, I see these women, most of them women, selling all sorts of food stuff, tomatoes, potatoes, mangoes, you name it. Most of what they're doing is actually on biodiversity. So that's the contribution. In terms of medicine, there is the pandemic now. Where is the solution coming from? I can tell you that from the beginning, our solution has always come from nature. That is going to remain the case. We are not going to get solution from somewhere else when we are in trouble. So nature has got this contribution it is making to us. So target 9 says ensure benefits including nutrition, food security, medicine, and livelihoods of people, especially for the most vulnerable, through sustainable management of wild, terrestrial, freshwater, and marine species, and protecting customary sustainable use by IPLCs. That is what that target says. Target 10 which is about agriculture. The population of the world is not going to go down. We are 7.5, it could go to 12 billion or maybe close to that by 2050. More food will be needed. How is that going to happen? How is the agricultural project going to happen with less space being available? And we're talking of having 30 by 30, we're talking of we should have more areas under biodiversity. How is all this equation going to balance up? So this is why Target 10 says ensure all areas under agriculture, aquaculture, and forestry are managed sustainably, in particular through the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, increasing the productivity and resilience of those production systems. That is what biodiversity can contribute to. Now, Target 11 is about, again, talking of clean air. You're talking of quality and quantity of water, protection of human being from hazards. That is what, again, biodiversity does for us. Maintain and enhance nature's contribution to regulations of air quality, quality and quantity of water, and protection from hazards and extreme events for all people. For all people, I said earlier that irrespective of who you are, if nature really is not providing services you need, you will suffer the same consequences like any other person eventually. Even if at the beginning you might look like you're protected somehow, but it eventually gets to you as well. Then Target 12, this is about the green spaces. More people are going to be migrating to urban areas with time. But those areas, in some places there, you see more concrete structures. It is not helpful to have just only buildings. And so we are saying increase the area of and access to and the benefits from green and blue spaces for human health and well-being in urban areas and other densely populated areas. Begin counting how many times we have talked about human health connecting to biodiversity, human health connecting to biodiversity. And then the last one, then I'll give the floor to the co-chair. This is about access and benefit sharing. Says implement measures at global level and in all countries, to facilitate access to genetic resources and to ensure the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources, and as relevant of associated traditional knowledge, including through MAT, that is the mutual agreed terms, and PIC. So, co-chair, I will hand over to you to go on with the next slides.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Francis. And you will see very shortly on your screen target 14 to 21 that relate to the tools and solution. 14, 15, and 16s are really a continuation. They talk about mainstreaming, starting with 14 that focus on government and the role of institution. 15 is around business and 16 around people. Let's go into the detail of those. On 14, obviously, we're talking about the policies, regulation, planning process. We're talking about those processes reflecting the biodiversity values. And one aspect that is very important is how do you reflect that into national accounts? The value also of policy tools like the assessment of environmental impact and across all sectors of the economy. And we're talking here about financial flow and how we're going to be ensuring that the financial flow are reflecting those values. 15 is switching over to the part of business and economic activities of all kinds. And the notion here is there should be an assessment and a reporting of dependency and impact on biodiversity. And then a notion of reducing this impact by at least half. There is also a need to reduce the biodiversity-related risk for those businesses that will want to do that, and moving toward full sustainability, including for those business involved into extraction, and including the process around production and supply chain. So this is the concept of a circular economy. And then finally, that would not be complete if we were not talking about what people do in terms of their choice. And to do responsible choice, first they need to have alternative available to them. And second, they need to have the information and enable them to make the choice. So definitively, the idea there is to reduce waste and overconsumption for food and other parts. 17 is a slight evolution of the targets around the negative impact of biotechnology and the way we need to reduce it, again, with a reference to human health. 18 and 19 are two very important targets, and Francis has been talking about this reducing the gap in financing. I'll talk it some more, and then further down in the presentation, there is a graphic that brings it all together. But let's unpack a little bit that with target 18, which is around redirecting and repurposing, reform, and eliminate negative incentive by at least $500 billion. This is based on numbers that you will find in the OECD studies about financing for biodiversity. And actually, the recent publication put the number even higher. So that 500 million we see is a way to improve the work that is already being done and speed things up. 19 is about the other side of the equation, which is around making sure that there is more resource available for what is needed. And it is about bringing the level of spending up to $200 billion. And that is based on the work done by the Hank Paulson Institute. As part of that, it is essential that we increase by at least 10 billion per year international financial flow to developing countries. The word after that are equally important: leveraging private finance, increasing domestic source mobilization, of course, as it is possible, taking into account national biodiversity finance planning, and strengthening capacity building and technology transfer. So there is a whole package around there. 20 is around the availability of information, monitoring, data, including the traditional knowledge as appropriate from local indigenous people and local community with their free, prior, and informed consent. 21 is a very important target. It talks about the involvement of a number of groups, including indigenous people and local communities, women and girls, and youth. And you will see here in target 20, associated with indigenous and local community, to respect their rights over land, territories, and resource. And that's a direct copy of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So that's the 21 targets. After that, there is a number of sections, and we'll go through them pretty quickly. As mentioned by Francis earlier, we've shortened and made those much more compact with the idea not to diminish their importance, but to make them more coherent with the rest of the tone of the text, more relevant to a higher number of people, and then focusing at the principle level. Detail will be in other decisions that will be presented by the COP. Implementation, make a reference to a number of strategies, and I won't list them all here. Enabling condition, refer to a number of indirect drivers identified by the IBES, including integrative governance, participatory approach, and synergies. And then finally, we noted that there is a number of other indirect drivers that we will not be touching in this framework, such as peace and demographic elements. On the next slide, we will be talking about responsibility and transparency, and there in that section J, we focused on the principle level. We made the links with the planning, monitoring, reporting, and reviews. We've explained what is meant by the responsibility of parties, what is meant by transparency, and expressed the dual goals of the system. On one hand, the system is about ensuring that the various pieces of national ambition are adding up to the global targets, and if not, how are we going to be able to address that? And secondly, how, once those national ambitions have been set, we can report on progress. This should be an open system and enable others to attach to it. And then finally, there is a section on our outreach, awareness, and uptake, which, as you know, is extremely important to get support from our societies if we want to engage in those change. Now, let me show you a graphical representation of the various pieces of the framework into one image, starting from the center, where we have living in harmony with nature, and that's the vision. That vision is further detailed into 4 goals, as Francis has described. those goals are expressed in where we want to be in 2030. What we want also is to see how those goals would be in 2030, and those are the milestones from B1 to A1 on the other side. Some you cannot see because of the 3D aspect of this graphic. In order to get to that result, we need to take some action, and those are the target 1 to 13 that Francis described to you. One of the messages we want to leave with you today is this is not a restaurant menu where you pick your favorite targets and let the other for another day. What we're trying to convey to you is this is a whole, and in order to reach any of those goals or milestones, we need a combination of those targets. And further, in order to get to those action targets, you need that support, and that's target 14 to 21, and they're all equally important in reaching the milestone and the goals. And all that, of course, is done within the context of condition and means of implementation. Earlier, I mentioned that I would be talking to you about how we're bringing the various financial aspects together. So let me try to do that. You will see in a minute on your screen a graphic. I'll pause to see. I'm sure you will see it now. So basically, that's your classic around 2 axes with on the horizontal axis time and on the vertical one amount of money. And basically, you have the red curve, which is about the need or the cost, and the black one, the resource available. We have a gap today, and what we want to go to is closing that gap by 2050. What we're suggesting to you is at 2030, we can go a long way, but we probably cannot close it right away in 10 years. What we can do is decrease significantly the cost by decreasing negative incentive, but also bring the expenditure and the resource available up. So going quite a long way from where we are today. As part of the package that was delivered to you, there is also a number of documents. And you will see here on your screen in a second a list of those documents. The glossary has been published in English, and we've finalized the other version, and I'm sure they will be posted very, very soon in the other language. This glossary is a list of terms and definitions that was useful to us as co-chair, and they may or may not be useful to you. That's an update from the previous version, but we felt it was useful for you to at least understand how we understood those terms. In addition to that, we're working on a set of one-pager on each of the golden targets. That's where we want to put all the details that we could not put in this very short document called the Global Biodiversity Frameworks. In particular, talk about the linkage to the goals and milestones. And remember, we had component that part of the monitoring frameworks. So we've been updating those components. We will have the linkage to the SDG, which we felt was very important, to the GBO5 transformation pathway, and of course to the indicators. As you will review the document, you will probably do like us, have the indicators document open on your computer at the same time and constantly going back and forth. But let's talk a little bit more about the headline indicators. You've asked us to engage in the revision of the indicators, and Francis and I were pleased to be able to do that, and we work very closely with the Secretariat in that process. You've asked us to decrease the number of indicators, and we did, from 48 to 38. But let's look, is that far enough? Is that too far? Let's start from the notion that there is 4 goals and 21 targets. That's a total of 25. Yet some goals and some targets are complex. As Francis described, the first goal, goal A, is actually 3 goals in 1. So maybe we're 25 there. And then when we look at target 1, there is 2, we're 26. So all in all, 38 may not be a bad number. Actually, when you look at the choice of headline indicators, 28 of those 38 indicators are already taken care of. They're either in the SDG system, in the UNEP system, in GeoBond, in the UN Stats Organization or other multilateral process. That leave 10 that need our forward. So really, what you should keep in mind is we're going to need to develop really 10 indicators. A few words on digital sequence information. So basically, we're going to be talking about that as an important part of the process, and one to which we have devoted quite a bit of attention, even if it's less visible than the GDF. Our observation as we move through many meetings on DSI is there's still inconsistency in the understanding of the basic facts. This is something that is a little bit concerning, because while we all understand that we can have and we should have different appreciation of the policy direction and the way we could be going, at least on the facts, we should be agreeing. However, with the delay of the COP and the fact that we're going to have a little bit more time, there is an opportunity there. The opportunity is to do some more detail and details on study on the costing and the feasibility of the various options. What we're trying to do is, for August of this year, let's have a look at the principle and see if we can agree on those. And then further, let's see if you can give us a further mandate to develop the options, with the notion that when we get to the time to negotiate face-to-face at open-ended working group 3 later and at COP15, we can go further in terms of solution. Little note on the side here is saying that if we're making good progress on the financial package, I think there is a part of the solution that could be found there. Some words, and I know some of you are interested in how we're going. So this is a kind of a very long timeline of everything we've done and what we got in front of us. In August, as you know, we're going to get to open-ended working group 3. We're going to start the meeting. That meeting will be suspended and reopened when we can meet face-to-face. There may be some intersessional work in between that you will tell us. We will see what is possible, desirable, and feasible. But eventually, we're going to get to that face-to-face meeting, and together with Substan SBI, we're going to have joint meetings or side-by-side or back-to-back, and we're going to be developing eventually a final package that will get to the COP, and there will be a number of important decisions coming from both Substan and SBI. If we're looking a little bit in the open-ended working group 3 process, as you know, we're going to be working online from the 23rd to the 3rd. What we want to try to find is the right balance between doing more than what we did last time in Rome, yet learning from the lesson of the virtual work done in May and June. And that leads us to the conclusion that we want to maximize the time in contact group to discuss draft 1 text. We're discussing on how we're going to be shaping those contact groups, and in a few hours we have a meeting on that. And then basically 3 to 5, pretty much along the same text, the structure of the text, probably. We'll try to keep consistency with the choice of scope and co-chairs that we used at Open-Ended Working Group 2, and we're active in Substan SBI. And perhaps that will be continuing some level of working all the way to 2022. The mandate, similarly building on what was done before, if there is consensus, document it. If not, document the various views. Try and identify the issues that need further work, and then try to think how we can make the best of the time ahead of us. Then we will get eventually in person, and that will be the time for in-person negotiation. Quick summary, and that's the last real slide about the various documents. You see here, draft 1 has been published, COP15 decision, proposal has been published, the DSI paper is published, glossary in English published, and the other language coming soon. One pager will take a little bit more time, maybe 26, maybe a little bit more. But the headline indicators are published, and we're nearly done on the component. And then the supplementary indicators will be a little bit further. So, colleagues, a very long presentation from Francis and I. I hope this is useful. I'm passing the floor back to Jyoti that will lead us through the question. Jyoti, over to you.
Thank you so much. I see that a lot of questions have already been written in the question box, but now we will invite you to write any more questions you wish. Please type them in the question box. And remember that these are questions for clarification or understanding based on the co-chair's presentation. We will collect a couple of questions so that the co-chairs can address them together. For those people that are joining us via Facebook or YouTube Live, kindly send your questions to us on live@cbd.int. So that's live@cbd.int. And just to remind you that these are not questions for negotiation, just for clarification and understanding. So we have two questions in the chat which are in Spanish, and I believe Basil will be able to respond to that. He will read the questions out, translate them in English, and then respond to them. And in the meantime, I will ask two more questions. One from Gary Geller. When will milestones beyond 2030 be determined, and by what process? And another one from Archie Rastogi. Thank you for the detailed presentation. It is not clear that there is a logical link between milestones and action targets. In other words, if all the action targets are achieved, it is possible that the vision will not be achieved. From a theory-based or evaluation perspective, these links may appear weak. So I shall hand these four questions to you both. Thank you.
So Francis, if okay with you, I'll start. And colleagues, I will do my best to translate. I am not an official interpreter, so apologies if I'm misrepresenting Roxana's word. I think the question is around how will we determine if we have a land planning process that is in line with biodiversity, and how will we know that we'll have more natural or we will be maintaining natural or wild area? I think this is a very good opportunity to point to the performance indicators in the performance system. In addition, so we're gonna have to have some performance indicators. In the discussion we were having on land use planning and how those systems will be respectful of biodiversity, there will be a part of that will be done through reporting from national governments, and there is plenty of example within the multilateral system on ways to assess those type of legal frameworks and do audit of them. So we're quite confident that we can do that. In terms of the protection of wild and intact species, the good news is that there is a number of global data available in addition to the data that will be available from national governments. The second question also from Roxana is around the same time of concept. How are we going to know are we making advances? And I'll make the links with this other question around the linkage between the goals, the milestones, and the action targets. So we're going to need to have a very comprehensive set of performance indicators related to the milestone and related to the action targets. And if you look at the list of headline indicators, that's a very good starting point. When you see the component, that's going to be even better. In terms of the linkage and the importance, I think it's a very good point, because we're going to need to know first whether we are making progress on the action, but whether those actions are leading to the change in ecosystem, in species conservation, etc. So definitively we need the two sets. And then the linkage, I know that there was some really good work done in Mexico on that, linking all the targets. We felt that was quite complex in terms of how we're gonna be making those links, and that's why we're gonna be presenting that in the one pager. But I spoke a lot, and maybe Francis can add to my comments.
Yes, I'll start with just to add on what I said. I'll start with the question which I think was raised on the link between the milestone and the action targets. Perhaps it is not being seen very clearly there. I think this still relates to basically the structure of this framework. We made the effort this time around, like we said, to bring this time around the milestone immediately below the goals compared to what was in the updated zero draft. Now, I think perhaps if I get this question right, is perhaps somebody trying to see when you're talking about these action targets, do they want to see it fall under specific goals, under specific milestones and so forth? So this is all about the structure of the framework, which you can continue to work on. But something we have to say here is that we thought that implementing these action targets, you need to do them holistically. We will not try to put like you have other action targets 1, 2, 3, 4 falling either under goal A or so forth, but knowing that each one of them complements or brings into focus the action, the outcomes that we want, the goals. So we will be, of course, as we move along, keep hearing your views that comes. If we still need to be thinking a little bit again on the flow of the structure, then that is something I continue to improve on. But that is what I get from that question. Then the other one is on when will the milestones beyond 2030 be determined? I think we are saying by the time we get to 2030, some effort will already be done. If you see, we are saying under, for example, milestone D3 or goal D, we are saying adequate financial and other resources for the period 2030 to 2040 are planned or determined by 2030. So I'm thinking that even by the time we get to that time, of course, we are going to be having meetings, the COP meetings, and I think decisions could come to say, now let's review progress where we are through the national reports and so forth. And then we set ourselves this milestone before we go to 2031. So I think that is something that is going to be done during the time of the implementation, but should happen just before we get to 2031. So by 2030, it should have happened. And I think that will be a process that will come. But of course, this is a framework of 30 years, implemented over a period of 10 years, 10 years. Yes.
Thank you, Francis and Basil. We have another set of very good questions that I can ask. The first one is from Kat Miller. Thank you for the presentation, co-chairs. I'm interested in how the figure of USD 200 billion per year was derived. Another one from Lee Lin. Will references be provided to show how quantification figures in the targets were arrived at? And two questions from Emily Nicholson. Basil, you have acknowledged that goal A is 3 goals in one and very complex. The initial zero draft had them separated into 3 goals, but they have been merged. What drove this decision? And the second one, ecosystems integrity is strongly highlighted in goal A, but we do not have any indicators for this. They have focused on ecosystems areas and species population and extinction risk. Is there a plan to add indicators that address ecosystems integrity, not just land use change? Thank you.
Thank you. Some really good question. Starting with Kate, who unfortunately I think I left the meeting. The reference, the 200 reference, 200 billion in terms of the needed resource needed to be available. Look in the Paulson Institute report. I can look up the exact reference tomorrow, but that's where it comes from. Getting to Lilim, question about the quantification figures. Most of those are coming from SEPSTA document ad 2, where we ask for scientific advice on the targets. So we've used those. For example, you will see directly the figures on nutrients, pesticides, and plastic are coming from there. The figure on the climate is a derivation of the figure coming from the UNEP report on emissions, so we can easily put all those in. Question from Emily. Goal A was 3 in draft 0. In Rome, we were very clearly told that those needed to be merged, so that's what we did in the updated 0 draft. And then there was no comment asking us to move it apart in the May and June session. But the question I would put back to Emily and to all of you is, what is important is that we have all the elements. And I think we're making a proposal there to have a lot more elements there and a lot more precision. So perhaps it is more important that we have the right element into that goal. And whether at the end of the day it is 1 or it is 3, perhaps is less of importance. Now, a question around ecosystem integrity, and I don't have the list of headline indicators in front of me, and probably I should know them all by heart now, but I don't. But if you look at the milestone, you will see the headline indicators related to ecosystem integrity. And that's where they should be. So looking forward to the discussion. No doubt, as we progress in the discussion, there will be further improvements in the indicators. And I think that's why we were so pleased to be able to engage into those discussions with the Secretariat, because they really form one with the framework. Over to you, Francis.
Coach, I think basically most of it you've said, picking on from the last one there. We are, of course, working even right now on the component indicators still, and which you indicated they will be coming up. But we will be looking at this to see, as we continue to work on indicators, if they are not there, and then we will take action appropriately. On goal A, I think this is again something we must say, even as co-chairs and as a team from the Secretariat, you know, that is the mandate that we are told to do. But honestly, when we are working on it, we found that it was one of a goal that is going to have so many elements in it. But again, this is upon the parties. If they feel we should take more action on that goal, and perhaps make it again either into 2 or then that mandate can only come from parties. But for us, our role was to really merge and try to make sure that we didn't lose some of those very important elements. That if you look at the updated 0 draft or the first draft itself, there were 5 goals, but we had that. We had that. Please merge this, and it is not easy, because if we didn't put all those elements there, the risk was that we are going to miss out certain things. So for us as co-chairs, what we've done with the help of the Secretary, to make sure that we capture most of those, so that parties can see that they are there, or stakeholders can see they are there. And then if there's further guidance on how to proceed with that, definitely we'll go along and see how to address it. That's what we've done so far, given the guidance we are given.
Thank you, Basil and Francis. I think we have come to the end of our questions for this section. I think there were some extremely excellent questions there, and so we've had a nice dialogue on this. We now have about 20-25 minutes left for this session, and I think that maybe we could use this time to look at the road ahead to the working group in August as well as beyond. And I believe that David Cooper is online also, Deputy Executive Secretary, and maybe he might wish to give a little bit of update on the way forward, and then we will come back to Francis and Basil on their expectations of the working group in the August meeting. Thank you. David?
Thank you, Jyoti, and good day to everyone, and thanks to all for joining this webinar. The roadmap is still being finalized. The timetable for up until the closure of it was discussed by the Bureau, and there's now ongoing consultations with the host countries. What the Bureau really had in mind was recognizing very much, and I think Basil already touched on this, that a lot of progress has been made and hopefully will be made in the virtual meetings of SBSTA, of SBI, and of the upcoming meeting of the working group. We saw, for example, a lot of progress in considering the first readings of the various items, and actually a lot of real progress in text-based discussions in the contact groups, where in SBSTA and in SBI we saw a lot of progress there. But I think as many on this webinar will have experienced, probably, discussions were difficult when it came to trying to approve CRPs. Of course, it had already been agreed that we were not going to adopt L documents, but to approve CRPs in plenary sessions. And so I think there's a broad consensus among parties that we will need physical meetings of SBSTA, of SBI, and of the working group to complete the drafts that go to COP15. As Basil indicated in the timeline that he showed, we're looking at around a January timetable for this. And that, of course, would mean that the physical meeting of COP15 and of the MOPS would have to take place after that for the finalization of the post-2020 framework and of other substantive items. And of course, we also will, in coming up with this timetable, need to take into account the need to make sure we have enough time to prepare for those meetings, not only substantively, but also logistically, so that we can be reasonably confident, at least, that those meetings can go ahead physically, notwithstanding the ongoing pandemic. And so that's driven the thinking behind this, and that the Bureau has taken into account in developing these proposals. At the same time, it's recognized that we need to maintain the political momentum. And so the plan is still to open COP15 on the dates that had been previously announced. That's October the 11th. And for a virtual setting, in a virtual setting predominantly. And that session will include a high-level segment to give political momentum to the process. The details of all of this have been worked out currently with the host government, and we hope that a formal announcement of all of this could be made within the next week or two. So that's broadly where we are, and broadly the road map ahead. And I would just say that now that we have the first draft of the post-2020 framework, we obviously, like the co-chairs, very much look forward to parties coming ready to discuss in detail that draft and to engage in text-based discussions on that draft, noting, of course, that further sessions, including the physical session, will be needed to finalize the work. Thank you, Jyoti.
Thanks a lot, David. Basil and Francis, do you want to now share your expectations for the working group meeting in August? Thanks a lot.
Sure, and Francis, if that's okay, I'll start, and then you can complement. David explained very well what we have in mind in terms of the work ahead of us in August. We all realize the limit of the work online. I think we've put here and touch it in. That does not mean that the work online is not useful. I think it has been quite a long time since we've been able to discuss the framework and the targets. You now have our work in front of you, and in a sense, the ball is now in your court, the parties and the stakeholders, and we're really looking forward to have the discussion and hear your views. The word I would use is let's make the most of the situation we have in front of us. There is, as we know, an urgency on the nature side. Francis has talked about it. Yet we recognize that we have to take into consideration the sanitary situation around the world, which may be getting better in part of the world and be getting worse in other parts of the world. So we have an opportunity in August to advance, and we have an opportunity to look at how we're going to be working together over the coming one and what can be practically accomplished. So our hope is that we have a good exchange, that we come out of this with a better understanding of each other's views and a better way to focus our attention and our work so we can make the most of the face-to-face meeting when it comes. Francis, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Coach. Just to add on to what you've said, of course, most of you recall that we had a virtual meeting of Substar and SBI through recently. So we are taking on board some of the good practice that came from there. But just to say that for this virtual meeting of the Post-2020, it will be a text-based discussion. It is not negotiation like you've said earlier. But something that you must bear in mind is that most of this discussion is going to happen in the contact group. And so please be in those contact groups. Try as much as you can to really come up with a text that can inform the Post-2020 process. So when in a discussion group, we hope that the outcome from there that goes to the plenary, that is the one that will be considered, and then it will be attached to the report of that meeting. That is what then will go to actually the physical meeting. So take it that the contact group is going to be very, very important in this process, and therefore be there. Be there. Try your best to contribute as much as you can. Please don't again wait necessarily for everything again first to come up or to say it at physical meetings. Let this be there. Let it be there in this contact group. Let be the outcome of that, so that when we get to the physical meeting, we are considering that, so that everybody will have had the opportunity to see what is it that we are saying as parties, and how do we now move it forward. So if we can't do that, I think we will make a lot of progress. In short, let much of the information we need to inform the physical meeting come in this meeting, so that when we are there, we are able to make progress. And of course, we are going to suspend this meeting. We are not going to close the meeting. We are going to suspend the meeting and then continue with it when we have the physical meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if I may just add a few additional points on modalities. We will be using the same platform that we have been using for the last 1 year. It's called Interactio, and I think most people are now very comfortable using it. We will have the same speaker and viewer assignments for observers and parties and stakeholders, and you are encouraged to send in all your registration by 26th of July. I see that there are no questions, but maybe there might be some now. In case anyone has any questions now on the expectations and modalities, now would be the time to ask. Maybe we can wait a couple of minutes. If not, then we can say we can end the session. So I think there are no questions, and there are no questions being typed. So perhaps you, Francis, Basil, you can say a few closing remarks, and we could close the session then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to meet with you and hear the question. If you have, we hope we have answered most of your question. If there is some remaining question, please contact us. I think our aim is to enable you to prepare as well as you can for the meeting. So sometimes we're a little bit difficult to reach, but we'll make our best to get back to you. And we're looking forward, and we're quite excited by this next step, and we hope that you share our enthusiasm. Over to you, Francis.
Yeah, thank you, Basil. Just to thank participants for attending the briefing. We know the time differences notwithstanding. I think we are on different time zones. Some people are late into the evening. In my case here, I'm now getting into the morning, coming just past 4:30 a.m. So we really thank you for making time and giving us this feedback, your thoughts already on what this framework looks like. And some of those questions, these were just questions for clarity. And we look forward to interacting with you during the virtual meeting. We only say that when we get there, let's have the same spirit of we have in the CBD, where we can have compromise, where we can make progress, because we really need to take action on nature. The longer we take to disagree, the more things go bad for us. So thank you so much. Stay safe. We hope to see you in less than, perhaps in about a month's time. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. And on those wise words, we can close the session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.